Hi, welcome to Skilled Pastor, where we offer practical advice for better ministry. Today, we're gonna offer you some advice on how to deal with conflicts. Now, conflicts are unavoidable. If you are in ministry, if you are in any kind of leadership, you're going to have some conflicts. You're dealing with people. People are sinful. Sinful people have issues, and they have issues with one another, and sometimes they might even have issues with you. So how do you deal with conflict in a way that is godly, in a way that can help people? So today, I've got my top 4 tips for dealing with conflict. First, I would say normalize conflict. Conflict needs to be a normal experience. Too many of us grow in situations where we just don't know how to handle conflicts. Maybe in your household, the way that people dealt with conflict was by fighting and flaring up and screaming and yelling. And if that's the case, then maybe you grew up in an environment where people just didn't know how to handle conflict. And anytime that there was conflict, it ended up in some fight. And maybe you're not that type of person, so you don't want to fight. You're a Christian. You don't want to raise your voice. You don't want to get loud with people. You don't want to be offensive. So you try to avoid conflict because you don't want to deal with that. The other end of it is that maybe some of us grew up in a home where people they had conflict, but they just wouldn't deal with it. They would let it fester, and no one ever dealt with it in a way that was healthy. So maybe you now as a leader, you're having to deal with conflict and you don't want to either. Now, let me tell you, you will have conflict whether you deal with it or not. And really, if you're going to be successful in ministry, you're going to have to learn to manage conflict before conflict manages you and manages your ministry. So the first thing you need to do is that you need to normalize it. You need to let your leaders, you need to let those people in your church know that conflict is a part of our human experience. So it's not about whether we have conflict or we don't have conflict, it's about how we deal with it when we do have it. And one of the things that you can do to handle conflict is that you always deal with the conflict and you don't necessarily deal with the person. So someone commits a mistake or someone does something to you, you don't approach them on who they are, but rather you approach the conflict. They lied to you or they did something that was wrong. You deal with that, and you never speak in terms of you and this is what you've done, but rather you say, hey, listen, this is your action and this is how it has impacted me and this is how I felt after it happened. So you want to normalize it, and if you think that there's no conflict in your church, I would say, why don't you ask some people, hey, how's everybody doing? Are there any conflicts? Are there any things that we need to deal with? And if you are the leader, you're going to have to learn to normalize and make it a part of your experience as a leader, because if you don't deal with it, it'll just fester and it can be worse off. The second thing I would say is own it. Like, own the conflict. You're the leader, you're gonna own the conflict, and you're gonna not just own it in the sense that you're gonna deal with it, but you're also going to own the outcome. Now, the reason we don't deal with conflict is because we think things are gonna go bad. This is gonna go real sour. It's gonna go bad. People might leave the church, and the reality is that those things could and might happen. Someone's gonna get their feelings hurt. Something's going to happen. Here's the thing though, if you don't own the conflict and if you don't own the outcome, you'll never learn from it. And really, if you had to pick an option, whether you're going to deal with conflict and have it, be a bad experience, or whether you're gonna just leave it alone, I would say go for it. Go deal with it, because you will make some mistakes. You probably will. But after you've made those mistakes, you can then ask yourself the question, okay, what did we do and how could we have done it better? And in the future, I'll be able to handle this better. Now, hopefully, not every conflict ends in people leaving the church, but if it does, sometimes you have to just let it happen. And you could have been at fault, and maybe, or you could have just done something different, but it's better that you manage the conflict, that you own it, even if it produces some bad results. If it produces bad results, you could always go back and apologize to people. You could always contact them and say, listen, I want you to know that I was a younger pastor then, and I really didn't have the wisdom that I needed to manage, our situation. And I'm sorry. Like, if I did something wrong, I need to apologize. Own the outcome, and don't just own it for you, and don't just own it for the people involved. Own it for your entire ministry. And if you've made some mistakes, it's okay. That's why there's grace. That's why there's forgiveness, even for you, the pastor. Okay, third, I would say be inquisitive. ask questions. You know what gets us into trouble so often is that we are so ready to rush to judgment. We don't have all the details. We don't know everything, and we have already jumped to a conclusion. And sometimes those conclusions aren't right at all. So I would say ask questions, right? So if someone does something, what I typically do is I say something like, hey, I noticed that you did this, and when you did this, I thought this. Am I right? And sometimes it gives the person an opportunity to go ahead and say, yeah, you were right. And yeah, I did stop talking to you because, you said something or you did something. And that gives me an opportunity to then apologize. I confronted them and I spoke to them about it, but it gives me an opportunity to apologize. Other times it was like, oh no, I'm sorry. I'm sorry you interpreted that by my actions. So I try to ask more questions, be a little bit more gracious, and just ask questions about the conflict. I think we get into trouble when we jump to a conclusion or we rush to a conclusion. We don't have all our questions answered. So we need to learn to ask questions, give the benefit of the doubt, because sometimes there is some doubt. And even when you think there is no doubt, I would say still start with a question. Ask them, you did this, and when you did this, this happened. Tell me more about that, because it felt to me, or I interpreted it as this. And, I just want to make sure that we're clear. So ask more questions. By the way, asking questions is a great way to approach people in any subject. So ask questions, be inquisitive. Last, I would say avoid it. Now, this may sound contradictory because I said, hey, normalize it, look for it, and now I'm saying to avoid it. What do I mean by avoid it? Well, I don't mean that you don't confront issues. I don't mean that you don't get, and talk about conflict, but rather when I say avoid it is, sometimes we just don't set people up for success. We just don't. As leaders, we're busy and we're thinking that we're giving people accurate descriptions of what their jobs entail. We think that we're communicating and we're really not. So one of the things that we need to learn to do is avoid it. How do you avoid it? Well, you avoid it with preparation. You avoid it with organization. So before you give someone a role in ministry, first of all, make sure that this is a good fit for them. Make sure that you're not setting someone up for failure, but rather you're setting them up for success. For example, I'll give you an example of something that we've dealt with in our church, right? So we have some people that are great people, but they're great servants and they love the Lord and they love working for the church. But I have learned that they're not very good with organization, right? So I used to give them roles where they would have to organize and they would have to set up meetings, they'd have to be visionaries, they'd have to do all these things, but they didn't have the skill set, at least not at that point, they didn't have the skill sets to do it. So one of the things I realized is instead of giving this person all this responsibility where I'm just loading them up and loading them up with, detailed work that they have to be really organized about. They would consistently fail, and because of that I said, I think we're going to change things up a bit. From now on, what I'll do is that I'll give you responsibilities that you can do in the moment, and you can be successful with those tasks in the moment. Some people are like that. So know who you're giving certain roles to, and when you approach them, maybe you gave someone the wrong role and you're saying, this role kind of needs this person, and I find you to be more this person. You want to just avoid conflict by making sure that you're putting people into the places where they can thrive. Don't give them a ministry that they're not going to thrive in. If they're not going to be good, children's Sunday school teacher, then don't do that. Or they're not going to be good at a specific role. Just don't give it to them. Avoid that and put them and place them in roles where you believe that they will thrive and succeed in. Well, I gave you my 4 ways to deal with conflict, but I'm sure there's so many more. I wanted to make sure I limited this video somewhat. So what are yours? What are your top 3? What are the things that you have learned in ministry that have really helped you? Share it with the community here. Go ahead and comment below. If you like this video, go ahead and like it. And if you really like it, go ahead and subscribe so that you can be a part of what we're doing here. So this is Skilled Pastor. You're also invited to go onto our website, skilledpastor.com. There you're going to find some really helpful resources, and we've got more videos for you. So this is all about offering you practical advice for better ministry. So share your comments below. Let us know how you feel about what we're putting out, and let us know. Just communicate. We want to be sure that we're talking. So God bless you, and we'll see you next week on a new video.